Consciousness is like the ocean. The H2O network, purveyors of passion, seeking to expand human consciousness from the deep depths of the universe of your soul.
Welcome to the H2O Network. This is your host, Dia Nunez, broadcasting live from New York City. I'd like to welcome everyone in the chat room, everyone on the phone lines, and to everyone who will be listening to this via the archives later on. Family, make sure that you check out the H2O Network profile page because you can download us via iTunes. Press that iTunes button and you can catch up on everything that has happened thus far in 2012. Amazing authors and more to come, I guarantee you. And there's also an RSS feed, so every time I put in a new show, you can keep on the burner as to who is coming on the H2O Network and all of our events. Family, if you'd like to call in to 917-889-7207. That's 917-889-7207. And also, family, you know that the H2O Network is percolating on Twitter, Facebook, Google+, YouTube. Just type into your search engine the H2O Network or Dia Nunez, and you'll be able to find me there. On Facebook, I have two profiles, friend in both, a lot of stuff percolating on the burner. And also, family, friend the H2O Network fan page. A lot of stuff goes on there. You can post your questions, and as a matter of fact, with this show, if you have any questions for Thomas, our author that we're going to have on this afternoon, type it into our H2O Network fan page, and I will most definitely read them on the air because I guarantee you, family, this is a show that you're going to want to make sure that you have pen and paper, if you will. And let me just tell you who the author is because I'm talking like y'all already know. Thomas Sheridan, he wrote an amazing book called The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. When I tell you, family, a beloved friend in Miami sent me one of his videos. I was blown away. This guy is so much on point, and I really wish that I had this book as a manual, if you will, in dealing with people. Because I actually married a psychopath, my first marriage. And, I tell you, watching these videos, tons of aha moments. And there are so many misperceptions of the word psychopath, what that really means, and how these individuals are percolating in our reality. They're literally everywhere. And I also have to do a disclaimer. This is not a show of fear. This is a show of information. I believe that knowledge is power and enabling one to use it in their practical life. So if you meet an individual, you can apply these principles and recognize the signs of who you're really dealing with, because we live in a very beautiful, but we also live in a very crazy world. That is the reality of it. It's a dualistic reality, and this is a wonderful book. And, he has many other things that are coming on the burner, and hopefully we'll have him come back to the H2O Network because a lot of his works tie into the psychopathic nature of not only individuals but as society as a whole, and it's going to be a very fascinating ride. And also, family, make sure that you check out Thomas on not on Facebook, on YouTube, because on YouTube he has a whole video production, if you will. I believe it's like 25 videos called the Labyrinth of the Psychopath. It literally breaks down all of these characteristics. It's a must-see. So make sure that when you go to YouTube, you type in Thomas Sheridan Artist. That's Thomas Sheridan, SHERIDAN Artist, and or the Labyrinth of the Psychopath, you'll be able to find Thomas there. So let me go to my Skype because Thomas is in Ireland, and we're going to Skype him, bring in our friend Thomas so we can start this conversation, because let me tell you something, family, there is a lot to talk about. And another disclaimer, a lot of things will be very, very shocking if you So hold on to your hats, buckle your seatbelts, because we're going to take a truthful reality ride on the road of the path of the psychopath, what that really means, because psychopaths are more prevalent than what we think. We have been brainwashed as a society to believe that psychopaths are just serial killers and they're locked away in some crazy place. Well, you got another thing coming, and Thomas will completely change your perspective, I hope. So this will be a learning experience, so make sure you're nice and comfortable and get your pens and paper out. Hi, Thomas. How are you?
Hi, Dia. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for spending time with us, because I know that you're an artist, a musician, and you're constantly creating and all of these wonderful books, and you're very busy. So I'm grateful that you came on the HO Network to help humanity, because I have to tell you, Thomas, for me, your book is literally a how-to manual on how to recognize a certain archetypal energy on planet Earth, and I think it's very valuable. And I said to myself, man, I wish I would have had this before I came to New York 20 years ago. Unfortunately, this is like the Mecca. Big cities where there are lots of money, if you will, is like the Mecca of like psychopathic individuals, unfortunately. But it's a wonderful book, and I thank you for writing it.
Well, thank you for that. And that was the basic idea. There was quite not a whole lot of books out there on socialized psychopaths and their effects upon individual society as a whole. And there was a lot of really fantastic sort of academic papers and stuff like that. And I couldn't understand for many years why this incredibly valuable information was, hidden away amongst academia, when millions of people all over the world were having their lives destroyed on a daily basis by these remorseless individuals who just see everybody as basically a target to be, identified, evaluated, manipulated, used up for what they need them for, and discard them without a care in the world. And there was real scientific, very hardcore, very well, tested and easily identifiable and quantifiable scientific information out there to pin this down, conclusively, that around 4% of the human population is not us. It's an interspecies predator, as Dr. Robert Hare of the University of British Columbia has termed them, who are here to literally prey upon us. And nobody knew this, except for people who probably took an active interest in it through things like psychology, psychiatry, or criminology. But the rest of us were the lambs to the slaughter. And I was just amazed and flabbergasted that this situation was so, part of the human condition and our experience upon this planet. And yet we were all completely ignorant. So what I felt was needed was a book that would strip down the technical jargon to the point where it could be just like presented to anybody in the world, easily translated into several languages, that wouldn't have all the technical and all the academic stuff in it, because that's all out there if anyone wants to find it. I can point them in the right direction and say, hey, look, this is if you were in a relationship, or you were bullied at work, or you had a boss who manipulated you, or you were even in a social situation, a church, a community, an organization, and there was an individual in there that when you were finished with them, you felt like you had been changed as a person. You had been manipulated, distorted, and convulsed into something you were not supposed to be. And when it all ended, you felt like you woke up one morning and you didn't know who you were anymore. The chances are you had been targeted and manipulated and then discarded by a psychopath. And it's a very common thing in the world today, and yet people don't know it. It was time that we made this common knowledge, because enough is enough, as psychopaths are a predator, a food source specific predator. They target kind, compassionate, and empathic people, and they seek to manipulate them and destroy them. And basically, puzzling people the labyrinth of the psychopath was not only, from my personal point of view, a primer on how to identify and deal with the subject, but very much, and I have no qualms in saying this, a declaration of war, peaceful war, and intent that the human race had finally had enough.
Indeed, and it's interesting because a couple of weeks before I contacted you and you decided to come on the HBO network, I did my own research in accordance with your videos, wonderful videos on YouTube. I was blown away, Thomas, at the propaganda. Now, a disclaimer, there's always another side of the coin. There is really good scientific research, but there's a lot of propaganda that has been put out there by the scientific community to basically confuse people into believing that the psychopath is like Ted Bundy, all of these serial killers, when in fact, there are many different levels of the psychopathic mind. They could be even in your family. They could be people you've married. They could be at work. And then, watching your videos, I mean, I was just blown away. And I understand the purpose of that because let's call it a spade, Thomas. The political system and a lot of these institutions in America and all over the world are actually run by psychopaths. So if you want to know what the real jig is, they don't want you to know that because then you will recognize the signs. Well, my God, our country is being run, our state governments are being run, our local governments are being run by a couple of psychopaths. They don't want you to recognize what those characteristics are. So from your perspective, give us some more of the misconceptions of what that word psychopath really is.
Well, to be fair to scientists, and specifically neuroscientists, they've always worked with the term psychopath. It really was changed by psychiatry, who have this almost sort of like labeling fetish to give a very simple disorder as psychopathology and to split it up into all different sort of other conditions like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, malignant narcissism, and borderline personality disorder, when in reality it's quite simple. It's just psychopaths and humans, and that's the end of it. But there's a vested interest in mythologizing, would be the best way I could put it, the psychopath out of the reality, out of Main Street and into the world of fiction. We are actively discouraged from assuming that a psychopath is somebody who could live on our neighborhood, work as a banker, work as the baker, be a housewife up the road, be the old lady, who, you see walking her dog every day. The reality is that's who they are. They're amongst us. They're a different sort of subspecies of humans who exist amongst us and see the rest of us as targets. Now, because of the nature of this sort of Babylonian pathological system that we've inherited for the last 3,500 years of this structural hierarchy of the pyramid system where, you rise a pyramid by being more pathological than the level underneath it. A situation has been created where psychopaths rise to the top, not out of their genius, not out of their ability, not out of their intellect, but out of their deviousness, because the system is hardwired from everything from banking, politics, mass media, you name it, it's all hardwired to reward the pathological. And the most pathological of them all is the psychopath. The psychopath has a system that's in place for them to not only hide amongst us, but to exploit us, move above us, and then exploit us from above. And they're very good at this if they're inclined that way. The vast majority of psychopaths are not inclined this way. I do not want to give the impression out that they're all sort of hotshot political types, Wall Street bankers. The vast majority of psychopaths are your everyday parasite living in the suburbs, the countryside, and the small town. They're the guy who moves in with a woman who may be separated with a couple of kids, and he'll just move in there to have a free roof over his head, not have to do any work, and probably take sexual advantage of his daughters when they reach puberty. That'd be the most common type of psychopath. Someone who gets married just because they need a place to live, because all psychopaths, they're not autonomous. They're a parasite, and a parasite always needs a host. That would work up to the sort of the local newspaper journalist who basically gets a power trip out of writing sort of slanderous stories about people, knowing he's kind of protected by the notions of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. He'll print any kind of propaganda the corporations and the government want them to print, right up to college professors, doctors, stockbrokers, and every aspect and facet of humanity in between. They are absolutely everywhere, from Main Street to Wall Street.
Absolutely, and I can agree when you say Wall Street, like I told you off air. I had to laugh to myself when you were talking about your experience and where you know, how you grew up, and then when you got into certain genres, if you will, how you just were bombarded with a filament of psychopaths. And I asked you, like, why is it that New York, literally, I mean, psychopaths are literally everywhere. I mean, you could be in the countryside, like you said, or in a big city, but it's like I never really experienced an area of craziness until I came to New York City. I've been here for 20 years, and I've experienced some real crazy things, ended up marrying one. So why is it that certain, I guess, geographic places, if you will, are more prone than others? Is it a money factor and there's more victims to be had because there's a lot more income out there?
Yeah, that's a lot to do with it. The psychopathic clustering generally takes place in parts of the world where business is really good. So, you know, you have the major centers like New York, London, Hong Kong, Dubai, anywhere where there's a lot of movement of people, a transient population where people are constantly coming and going. A city where nobody has a past, the New Orleans, the Marseilles, you know, places like that. Large urban areas with a good, you know, a good financial infrastructure that attracts a lot of types that will be useful to the psychopath: prostitutes, pimps, drug dealers, and then victims within that, because we're all drawn to the magnetic pull of these urban areas at some stage in our lives in order to further our career or maybe even our sort of artistic or, you know, our showbiz or whatever ambitions. And psychopaths are very well aware of this. In the 1960s, a friend of mine, when I used to live in the U.S., a friend of mine, her father was a cop in San Francisco in the 1960s. And, you know, we all hear about the peace, love generation, the flower children and all this. Now, that originally did start out like that in San Francisco. That really did happen. But as soon as that scene became fashionable, you would have psychopaths descending upon that city for all the sex and drugs and rock and roll that was there. And he said literally overnight it went from, you know, being really the Haight-Ashbury center of like flower power to a place where you need to have a gun with you. It was full of all kinds of psychopaths, rapes, murders, robberies, everything went up. And it just, when a psychopath moves into, when psychopathic clustering takes place in an urban area, but it can happen in a rural area too, but specifically in an urban area. And it doesn't have to be a gigantic city like, you know, like London or New York. It can be you know, a regional or a smaller size city, and you will get them moving in there, and they will literally cause mayhem. When people talk about the quality of urban life being, you know, being less than what you get in a rural area, a lot of that is down to psychopaths. A lot of them will just move into a city, and they will cluster, not purposely, but their pathological drive will leave a trail of misery and ruin behind them. But I don't want to give the impression it's only large cities that have them, because they're in the suburbs and they're in the small towns and they're in the rural areas too. But yet we come directly into contact with them en masse when we hit the cities, specifically the cities like New York.
Oh, you ain't never lied about that, Thomas. What are now getting to the meat of things, what are the characteristics of a psychopath? Because as I said, we have been brainwashed to perceive that there is one genre of being a psychopath, Ted Bundy and all of these serial killers, and they're basically sitting up in jail, which is a true statement. There is an aspect of psychopathy where they do kill, but there are many different areas of being a psychopath, and what are those characteristics?
Yeah, well, Ted Bundy, you know, he was a psychopath, but he's as rare, his type, his pathology, his serial killer psychopath is as rare as a Muhammad Ali or any great sports person. He's the smallest minority within the psychopathic field. The vast majority of them are absolutely not violent, physically violent. They're psychologically violent, which is a different thing, and in many ways more damaging. At least the ones who are coming to kill you, you're aware of it. The ones who are out to destroy your mind, it's very different. They'll do it by stealth. Now, Herbie Cleckley, who wrote the book The Mask of Sanity back in the 1940s, classified the term psychopath, which had been around for about 60 or 70 years up to that point, as Basically, someone who has a low sensitivity to emotions of other people coupled with impulsive behavior. So basically, somebody who wants exactly what they want and will do anything to get it. Just business. Doesn't matter who they hurt, damage, betray, stab in the back, use, manipulate, and then discard. If they want something, they just take it, and that's the end of it. No compassion, no remorse, no guilt, just business. Now, due to my own work, which has been going on in this field since about 1994, 96, but serious in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, really looking into it, I've identified 5 absolute traits of the psychopath that every psychopath has. Doesn't matter if they're the shifty, parasitical sort of like middle-aged child psychopath who lives off his parents and by staying in the basement the rest of his life playing video games, right up to the Wall Street banker, male, female, they all have these 5 traits. The first trait is missing or cryptic past histories. Now, this won't really apply to younger ones, but by the time they're 30, they'll have a period in their life that doesn't seem to make sense, or several periods. But you'll always be asking yourself questions like, how come I never saw pictures of this person before I knew them? How come they seem to have disappeared for years? And it's very cryptic. There's always periods where their families are sort of like a 3 or 4 year period, or maybe even longer, where they kind of vanished. You're always asking yourself where they are, who this person really is, because ultimately it's not the person. And what that brings you to is the second one, which is invented personas to manipulate others. No psychopath has a personality as such. It's a blank canvas designed for pathological drive. And on top of that blank canvas is a personality that they have invented to manipulate specific individuals or a specific organization or situation. If I was a psychopath and I had a desire to target you, and I found out you were into basketball. I may have had no interest in basketball before I started to target you, but I would make sure to go online and learn everything there was about basketball. So when I initially target you, you will think you have met someone who's just like you. That creates a situation where I could be a soulmate if I wanted to be with you. This be in a romantic relationship, a friendship, whatever, just to target you. And then when I was sick of you and dumped you and moved on to someone else, I found that the next person was into poetry, I would pretend to be a poet, and that's how they work, the invented persona. The next one is that they will use pity. Psychopaths because they're targeting empathic and compassionate and caring people, they will always come in with a sob story at first. Oh, my partner cheated on me all the time. They used to beat me up. He used to be a drunk. He was an alcoholic. I was badly abused as a child. My parents didn't love me, blah, 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 blah. Big sob story, violins. Now, the chances are there could be a small kernel of truth to this, but it's generally wrapped up in an enormous, gigantic haystack, a silo of fabrication to make their suffering and their past seem more tragic than it is in order to find kind people who will feel for them. The next one after that will be they will have high levels of the hormone testosterone. Now, if that seems to be a byproduct of the same neurochemical deficiencies within their brain, because their hormones are often off as well, and you'll find that that's where the impulsiveness comes from, the hypersexuality, high levels of testosterone in a female, although it's not sort of like feminine, in a sort of beautiful sort of female sort of like energy sense. It's sexually attractive to men for some reason. That the high levels of testosterone has that effect upon men. And then the final one is the invented persona. They will invent a persona just to get whatever they want.
Wow, that's amazing. And I know that you, in your video series, you really go into depth about some of their characteristics and how they interact. What is the percentage of the population do you think are psychopaths? Because the number that you gave in your videos it astounded me. I was like, are you serious?
Well, I actually think some people tell me I've actually underestimated the numbers. Some tell me it's over. Well, I don't know for sure. I can only go by the official numbers. So I rounded off the North American, European, and the British numbers, and that was 4%. which seems to be about right, but it depends where you are. It could be in a place where, like New York, it may be higher. In a rural area, it may be down to 1%, but it's definitely way more than 1 or 2%, and it's probably not up to like 6 or 7%. So 4% sounds right to me, but it depends on where you are. Now, they'll be psychopathic to some degree. So literally 1 in every 22 to 25 people is a psychopath.
Unbelievable. That's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like, how do you can't even respond to that. But it's more, like I said, we've been brainwashed, if you will, by the powers that be to perceive that psychopaths are locked away and we're all safe, which is completely a farce. I mean, like you said, they're in our neighborhoods. They could even be in your family, at the workplace. Now, the thing that I found really interesting are the characteristics of interaction, of socialization with other individuals. If, for example, if you're in the workplace, how does one, because, you know, the workplace can be very psychotic, how do you know that you're coming, what is the manipulation? Because I know that they're master manipulators with their words, if you will, when it comes to dealing with other human beings. How do you recognize a psychopath in the workplace?
Well, the first thing is to assume that they're not a psychopath, because most times a jerk or a creep is just a jerk or a creep. However, in the workplace and in relationships, sometimes they're not. Now, that's a good question to ask. In the office, how would you identify them? Well, look for an individual that doesn't seem to be particularly skilled at any one field, but yet seems to be very well in with management and other people through things like flattery, playing the game, pretending they're busy when there's nothing to do, walking around in a sort of a contrived state of, I'm busy, I got deadlines to meet, and they're moving from floor to floor, office to office. Individuals who have worked late nights and get in the morning for an early morning meeting at 9 o'clock as if they never missed a wink of sleep. When you start looking into it, they didn't really do anything, but they because of the high levels of testosterone, they can stay awake for long hours. Another one would be if you thought you were being specifically targeted by one, they would have a group of enablers around them, basically what would be useful idiots, people they would surround themselves with to make themselves look more powerful within the office environment. They would do things like they would make friends with these people, flatter them. They would find their insecurities. If there was a guy who was overweight in the office, he would tell him, "Hey, don't you look so bad?" And you know what? You saw some guy who was shy around girls. He would take her out and introduce him to girls and maybe even get him prostitutes. And he'll build up this sort of like network, or she will build up this network of sort of like useful idiots. And people in the office will be the kind of person saying, "Why isn't this guy being fired? Why is she still working here? She does nothing. She does nothing. He does nothing." And yet they seem to be protected by the boss in some way, because you'll find out that they're using flattery. It's usually the person in the job who you're saying, this person really is not valuable to the organization, yet they seem to be unfireable. Very often that's a psychopath.
And one thing that you mentioned is flattery, because they're really good with that. They really study individuals, if you will. How do they use flattery? And this can also apply into intimate relationships. How do they use flattery in the workplace and intimate relationships, Thomas? Yeah,
the level of the flattery they use is beyond the compliment. It's actually designed to change the chemical, the levels in your body. It's basically, the term used is called love bombing, and it's what cults do, where they'll find somebody and they'll basically, if someone tells you you're wonderful enough, you will start believing it after a while, and it will actually implement chemical changes within your body. Then you become sort of addicted to this person's flattery. In a relationship, they'll tell you you're beautiful and you're wonderful every 5 minutes. And after a while, you become addicted to being told you're beautiful and wonderful every 5 minutes. In a job, they'll tell you, "You're my best friend, really trust you. It's great, great to have you, and you're so wonderful, you're so beautiful, you're so good looking." And you become addicted to this constant praise. You become addicted to it, and then one day, the psychopath just pulls it away, and then you're cold turkey. Then you want to know, what have you done to offend the psychopath? You haven't done anything. You're being trained now. You're now a mind control slave. You're now under the jurisdiction of the demands, and you will acquiesce to the psychopath. This is when you become their pet, their doppelganger. You will miss that flattery. You will want that flattery back. And they know this. They've been using this since they were teenagers. And they'll also do it with sex as well. You get amazing sex for so long, and then one day, boom, gone. And you want to know why this suddenly stopped. And they don't enjoy sex the same way a normal person does. To them, it's a power and control thing. Because ultimately, that's all psychopaths, no matter what they're involved in or interested in, power and control. And that's what the flattery is, to change the chemical nature of your brain, to make you addicted to the psychopath and their love bombing, and then to remove it, take it away, withdraw it, and then you're betrayed, and then you'll be made literally crazy by them, and you'll do anything to get that love back.
So it's almost like what you're saying is that they create this false dependency, if you will, even though they're not doing anything. They create this emotional dependency, if you will.
Yeah, but it's purely false. Like when people fall in love with psychopaths, it's not real love. Doesn't go to the soul of the two people. You're falling in love with a fake persona that's been invented specifically to target you. And what it is, it's a chemical addiction. There's a difference between chemical love and real love. The real love is what two people who have been together forever have, and it doesn't matter if they one grows old or one gets sick and they still love each other. It's what a mother has with a child, a father has with his child. That's two friends will have. That's real love, no matter what they're there. A psychopath does chemical love. It's what the person hasn't fallen in love with. They've fallen in love with a chemical addiction, a dependency, as you say.
Indeed. And what makes people targets for? Because I know that in one of your videos you say that psychopaths are excellent at really checking out and analyzing people's social behavior, how they speak. This is why I always say a closed mouth catches no flies. And you said never tell a psychopath or someone that you perceive to be a psychopath your business, because they will actually use that information against you to try to get in emotionally into your paradigm of reality. So how is one targeted? Do they just check out the scene and say, well, this one is wounded emotionally, this one is wounded, and I'm going to go for them?
Yeah, and and what makes that worse today is that we live in the big now age. We live in an age where we're told through reality TV and all these terrible TV shows. The most psychopathic thing on earth today is probably, mass media, particularly television. And we're told to spill our guts out, because we've been coached to do this by all these idiotic Hollywood celebrities going on TV like Barbara Waters and spilling out their guts, with crocodile tears. We've been coached through this system to also tell other people our personal business. This makes us very, very easy for psychopaths to target. We've been somehow coached to believe that opening up and telling everybody your personal business is somehow an expression of your humanity. It really isn't. What's happening here now is you're making yourself so easy to manipulate. You see, psychopaths in the media will actually have a sort of a pathological sort of rapport with the ones in the streets, and they'll know that ultimately the job of the psychopath everywhere is easy if everyone is an open book. And you'll find that's what they look for. Someone who's an open book, who may have a wound, maybe they didn't have a father growing up. The psychopath will become the daddy who never came home. Maybe they had they were abused when they were younger. The psychopath becomes the healer. And so they will look for those things missing in you, and that's how they will target you. Now, they'll be after something. They won't be sometimes they'll do it just for the hell of it, for amusement and sport. But generally they're after something. They're looking for a place to live. They're looking, a psychopath gets married just to have a place to live. I know it's incredible to us, but that's what they do. That's why their relationships happen and develop so quickly. They're talking about spending their old age with you, within 3 hours of them having met them. And this is what they're like. They move their relationships along very, very, very quickly. It flies. And you're whipped up in a sort of a maelstrom of flattery, love bombing, idealization, and incredible romantic gestures, and it's all designed to make you a dependent upon them. Now they're very devious. They can spend time working on someone. They may be in a relationship, but maybe planning to move on another person. They could be in work with this person. They could be in college with them, and they'll start to it'll begin as a friendship, and it'll be built up to the point where it's just on the point of a relationship, and then on a specific date or time, whatever, maybe a staff night out or something, bam, it switches. The psychopath legitimizes the relationship with the person that they have been building up slowly, usually through a story of the other person abused them. Well, that's probably not true at all. Or neglected them, and then it's like a switch. They move. See, when a normal person has a relationship that ends, they need time to get over it. They need time to look at themselves, evaluate their lives, mourn their relationship. You know, a psychopath isn't like that. It's like changing a channel on TV. Boom, I'm over. Done. And that's what they're like. And this is why they will move from relationship to relationship with incredible ease. If you have no real depth in there, there's nothing in there except window dressing, you have all the time in the world to be devious, manipulative, and learn how to read people.
Indeed, and they move from relationships like mean nothing to them. They could be married and move, having one relationship with their wife or whatever, but they're having like all these other side relationships, and it's like this. It's clever, but it's not clever because they always end up getting found out because they never keep track of their lives. But it's really interesting. Their sexuality, if you will, and one of your viewers sent you this question about straight women and supposedly the psychopath who's a straight man who end up leaving that individual for a gay man. And I know that you're in the process of writing a book on communities where psychopaths are really attracted to because it allows them to create all of these different personas, if you will, and to percolate in an easier way. What is it about that? So basically you're saying that the psychopath is asexual and gay or straight means nothing to them, right?
Oh, yeah, psychopath's asexual. It's just an orifice. It's a device that they can actually use, and they don't care if it's on a man or a woman. Once they can use it, they're not interested in those kinds of. They don't see men or women in those roles. They'll claim they are, but it's not true. The gay husband is very often a psychopathic individual. Now, I know people are going to say this is I'm homophobic here. I am not homophobic. It's gay men who told me all this stuff in the research for my books because they've been the ones who've been exploited within these relationships by these formerly straight men. But what happens is a gay man will see, a straight man, with a wife and kids playing Mr. Straight and all this, will suddenly see maybe a gay opportunity in their community. They'll notice that the gay community is made up of like young men, mainly, affluent, with high disposable income, living in most cities in the nicest part of town. If they want it, they've got good contacts for business, the arts, whatever, and then they will suddenly find one of these men and become gay, and then they will just astound their wives by just suddenly walking out and becoming a gay man. They'll often become the super gay. They'll portray themselves as a sort of a gay heroic figure who just came out of the closet. I was a straight man living a lie, and now I'm a gay free man. I'm being honest with myself. And the reality is they're just being devious, and they've gone on to destroy the lives of a gay man or several gay men in the same way they destroyed the life of the straight woman they left behind. And what's particularly tragic about this is that the woman that they've left behind is not only emotionally and psychologically damaged by the experience, but is often left with the financial ruin that this guy has left in his wake as he came out of the closet, and I'm doing that in quotes. And what happens then is she's in financial ruin, but she can't really say anything about it because she'll be accused of being homophobic. You understand? By not understanding that he was actually living a lie when he never was. Now, I know that really does happen in some cases, but those kinds of men who come out of the closet that way, they do it gently and over time, and they consider the wives and girlfriends are leaving behind. They don't just walk out on them and go, I'm gay, and that's what these guys do, and they become often very flamboyantly gay. Initially, this is because of their whole persona role thing that they play, and then they will go on to manipulate, deceive, destroy, and ravage the lives of gay men in the same way they did the straight women. Just business.
When I heard your viewer ask that question, I began to think to myself, why is it? outside of the monetary, the money and being taken care of, that makes some of these niche communities so prone to this type of archetype, this type of individual. And I began to think about it because it's not just the gay community. I've noticed that, and I know I'm going to probably get hell for this, but in the spiritual, so-called conscious community, you have, it's like running rampant. And I began to think to myself, well, you talk about the ego and the whole aspect of ego with the psychopath, and they thrive upon that. And within some of these communities, if you will, because people are seekers of certain things, whether that be sex, companionship, or spiritual enlightenment, that they really, we as human beings tend to deify individuals. So when you're in these communities, it is quite easy for them to run rampant, because either you're deifying them because they're a guru, or you're deifying them because they look beautiful, have muscles, what gay men like. I know I'll probably get shit for that, but, this is what it is. So talk about the ego when it comes to the psychopath, because I think that that's very, very important.
Well, you're right about the New Age groups and the spiritual and conscious groups are loaded with psychopaths, and it's very unfortunate because I'm actually quite right now deeply sort of investigating and researching into that whole community, and I found it's quite tragic because most of the people you meet in there are actually quite well-meaning, decent people they just want the good things in life and a decent society, but the gurus, a lot of them are psychopaths. A lot of these fake healers are psychopaths. It'd be unfair to say that. I mean, look at the Catholic Church. I mean, what do you think all these pedophile priests are? Why do you think they were moved from parish to parish? That's the same thing. Psychopaths are ultimately only interested in power and control. Now, because they have no understanding of any kind of spiritual depth, there's no self-realization there in terms of their actual place within the universe other than predators. This is why when a psychopath goes to sleep at night, they're literally a robot switching off. They don't have that moment of internal self-realization where they mull their thoughts of the day, their place in society, their place in the universe like the rest of us. And that's why they wake up instantly in the morning too. It's just business. It's like a robot. Now, but they don't understand that, but they understand the power that it has on other people. You know what I mean? Like they're aware of the power that they can see that people do have this thing called a spiritual need in them, that they do have this need to believe they're greater than just somebody who's just, a biological robot that walks the earth. And they see that effect in people, and then they manipulate and prey upon it. And so that's how they get into those communities. Now, regarding the ego thing, if you don't have a spiritual, if you don't have a soul, let's put it this way, if you don't have a soul, you will try and fill that void, that hollowed out non-entity within you with ego. Even if you're not a psychopath, but psychopaths to them just becoming an egotistical that's just par for the course. So you want people to adore you and worship you just for fun, but it's also to get your kicks out of them making them so gullible. And this is why they're drawn to anything where there's an ego thing, acting, advertising, anywhere they can look like a hotshot superstar with the least amount of effort. The high testosterone is also very good for bodybuilding. It keeps this nice strong jawline. A lot of these female models that are 6 feet tall and have muscular frames, and Hollywood actors, a lot of them would be psychopaths as well. They would have the high testosterone. Now, I'm not going to say that all women and all men have high testosterone are psychopaths, but I can just tell by certain types, by their behavior, how they treat their relationships. And also a lot of them they just look at me. The psychopath is so desperate to be the center of attention. They have a narcissism that's beyond we're all narcissistic to some degree, but they have a narcissism that's spectacular.
Indeed, and it also goes to the whole expert aspect. And you were saying about their arrogance and looking down upon people, if you will. They take information.
Anything to do with environmentalism is filled with psychopaths. I care about the planet, that kind of thing. Anything that's kind of self-righteous, the Occupy movement. And sadly, the thing just stank at them from day one. I could see it as clear as anything. Now, that's not to say they all are, but I could actually tell right off the bat that was where the psychopaths are clustering, because it gave them this sense of self-righteousness, like newspaper journalists, especially the ones who profess to be liberals and progressive. They're the sort of like the intellectual psychopath. They don't really have any intellectual ability. They're great copyists. They're great at reading a corporate press or a government press release or a university press release, and then they pontificate upon that and how noble they are and how self-righteous they are. The whole global warming thing was just like a field day for them. You could literally tell who was a psychopath from day one because they would defend the likes of Al Gore no matter what, and that you have that sort of intellectual psychopath. And they're usually not, and they're the ones who, they're actually quite some of the most dangerous ones of all, because they're the ones that are used by psychopathic politicians to help enforce pathological and oppressive public policy upon the rest of us. I would actually say some of the most dangerous human beings that have ever lived have probably been newspaper journalists, from the Soviet Union to the ones writing the pontificating in the broadsheets today. These are some of the most dangerous creatures that have ever lived, and many of them are psychopathic.
Well, I can say that I agree with you to a certain extent. If you study American media and media around the globe and how they twist things and taunt things, it's like this mental, psychological manipulation that goes on. Meanwhile, you have all of the little followers, if you will, fighting over this, fighting over that, what this person said, and they love it. And it's like, are you not recognizing that, the media industry, if you will, they're master manipulators at many, many things. It is quite frightening.
Well, the whole left-right, liberal, conservative, that's all psychopathic. That was all invented for us to fight over two non-existent sides that ultimately lead to the same corporations and globalists at the end of the day. And so we can sit there saying, I'm a liberal and I believe in this, and I'm a conservative and I believe in this. And at the end of the day, neither one knows if they're telling the truth or not, because what they're regurgitating is just a press release that's been handed from on high.
Absolutely, I agree. That's why I'm just like, it's all the same jig to me. Republican, Democrat, liberal, it's all the same craziness, if you will. They're not like the regular population. If you really pay attention closely, anyone would be able to figure this out. As my grandmother says, truth is hidden in plain sight, but it's very hard. I know that when people were reading your book and watching your videos, Thomas, that a lot of people had a hard time accepting these things, that they're amongst us, if you will. What has been some of the reception that you've received from this book?
Overwhelmingly positive, incredibly positive. I've got no bad reviews other than ones that were obviously a hit piece for some reason. But everyone, I get inundated constantly with emails, messages. People call me from all over the world, like at home, to thank me for writing the book. So, when I wrote the book, I was actually a little nervous. I was wondering if, have I opened a kettle of worms here? I believed in what I had written. With all my heart, and intuition plays a big part in this. But I was ready for the flack, and amazingly, it just didn't arrive.
No, I think this is well overdue, and I'm glad that someone is actually speaking upon it, because, like I said, we have been indoctrinated to believe the psychopath is just one thing due to the media machine. Of course, they'd have you believe in one thing, but they're percolating everywhere. There are people who are master manipulators at getting the things that they want out of this reality, and through innocent individuals, So it's a very sad state of affairs. What is the difference between a female psychopath and a male psychopath?
Really nothing. They both operate exactly the same way. It depends on, a female. Vanity plays an enormous part in it. So you'll get like middle-aged female psychopaths, actually right up into their 80s, who still think that like young guys are crazy for them and stuff like that. So female psychopaths, because it's a man's world, don't have the same level of opportunity outside sort of sexual power that men do have, like male psychopaths would have in business and so on. But they operate the same way. They're devious, manipulative, they target, they use, they discard, and they move on.
One of the things that I love about your book as well is that it helps you recognize the characteristics of people's behavior and maybe the motive. You know, you're always making an assumption until you really find out. But this is what I love about the Internet. It is like one big mishmash of a social experiment that's very, very fascinating. And I have found that psychopaths, they love to lurk, or people who have psychopathic tendencies love to lurk on social media networks. And what are some of the telltale signs that you may be dealing with someone who is not what you think that they are? And this is why, and I've heard you say this, this is why if you say my name, Dia Nunez, you know who I am. I've made videos that I'm a real person. My picture's up there. It ain't no picture of some little flower bud, and you see a name and you've never seen who these people are. You actually know that I'm a real person, that I exist. I'm not hiding behind some persona or some facade, if you will. What are some of the things that you've noticed on how psychopaths move in the Internet world?
Well, in the social networking world, it's happy days. They've got everything they want there, especially things like Facebook. That's another thing I would ask your listeners from now on to not be sticking all their business and what they're doing on Facebook, especially if they have a problem in their lives. You do not post that out there, because there's millions of psychopaths who can read that and find it some way. So they will look for that. And I would ask people to embrace, maintain, and cherish their privacy, because you're entitled. You have the right to retain your privacy, no matter what Facebook tells you. So that's look for people who seem to have an ability to flatter or change persona online. They're the church-going family man one week, next week they're the ladies' man, boasting about this, that, and the other. Another good way of spotting them is that if you're aware they've done something horrific to another person, maybe they just discarded or valued the person, and the other person has probably vanished offline, is dealing with the pain and sorrow, the psychopath will just be going on like nothing's ever changed. That's a very good way to spot them. They'll post a picture of them smirking, laughing. The night that they claim to be upset about a relationship that ended, they just don't care. Or it's just, there's no ability to empathize for others. So when there's a highly charged emotional situation like a breakup in a relationship or a marriage, or even the death of someone, they don't seem to care. They just seem to just move on, or just go on as usual. There's also, in my next book, in my forthcoming books, Defeat the Demons, I will be going into things like Second Life, the virtual community. That's a spectacularly good place for psychopaths to lurk, because they can, their avatar, nobody is real in there anyway, and no psychopath is real. So a lot of people who are drawn to Second Life, it tend to be, I'm talking about the normal ones, a lot of them will be people who they're not able to socially integrate in society. They could be handicapped, they could be elderly, they could, have difficulty communicating with others, and there's loads of psychopaths in there ready to target them. And they'll have all different personas. One woman was telling me about, there was a psychopath in Second Life. I don't know if you know what Second Life is.
Oh, yes, I do. I'm actually a member of Second Life.
Well, I didn't know they have things like virtual abortion clinics. The virtual abortion clinics are actually built by psychopaths who would have sex with women in Second Life, and there was actually a pregnancy script where you could actually make the woman pregnant. So if you wanted an abortion, she would have to go to the Second Life abortion clinic that he would own and have to pay him for the abortion. And that's how devious and manipulative they are, that they would actually see Second Life as a way to make money through things like a virtual abortion clinic. So that's what they're like if they can get away with anything. So they would be like that in real life, and some of them absolutely are, if they had that kind of power to hide that well. So the virtual world, online dating, anything like that, millionairematch.com, and I shouldn't mention the website name, but, I'm sure there's lots of nice millionaires on there as well, or people looking for nice millionaires. But you know what I'm saying? There's anything to do with where anyone can pretend to be something they're not. But I would ask your listeners to please guard your privacy and, maintain distance from strangers, because I'm not being trying to create paranoia. There's actually wonderful things about Facebook and things like that as well. I mean, it's been very good for me on so many levels as well. I've met some really wonderful new friends, genuine people, but just there's nothing wrong with guarding your privacy. Don't be putting every single photograph of you up there.
Absolutely, I would agree. And, it's funny that you talk about Second Life, because I've been on Second Life, I think since it was incepted. And I don't know what it is about my personality to sort of I like to observe people and their behavior. And I tell you, these social experiments are very, very profound, Thomas. And, you know, along with the abortion and having babies, people can get married in Second Life. People own homes in Second Life. Murder is committed in Second Life. It is, when they say Second Life, it is truly a second life. And, you know, they not only do you have the virtual technology aspect of it, but you also, there's like a voice aspect, like the way that we're speaking now. And there's a lot of weirdness that goes on, because when I'm running around in Second Life, I always use my voice piece so people know who I am. Hey, how you doing? My virtual Dia, Tabitha, is really me, you know what I'm saying? It looks like me and all of these things. But people shun away from that. They shun away from who they really are with these identities, and they're very secretive. It's a very trippy world. And with the advent of technology, Thomas, and the way that we're going with the technology coming out into the so-called real world, it's going to be a little scary. I'm fearful. Fear is not a good thing, but I'm wondering what the future beholds. You know, it's like eugenics to the nth degree.
Yeah, well, I'm actually positive now, because now the cat's out of the bag with things like psychopathology. People are talking about it. So it's happened at just the right time. Also, like I said, there's a lot of good things to this stuff as well. There's almost like, you know, when you think about it, the Internet, the World Wide Web, it really is a sort of, it is Carl Jung's collective unconscious in some ways come into manifest technologically. So there's like good things about that as well, beautiful things about that as well.
Indeed.
So we must cherish that stuff as well. You know, it has developed almost a level of telepathy. I don't know what it is. I can't say it is telepathy, but I almost, you know, people can now tell what a person's mood are like by a few words they can post on a Twitter feed or something. So it's almost like, and there is something to that as well. We are, you know, the Internet can be tremendous for developing our neural pathways in our brain and neuroplasticity if we do it correctly. We're not like twittering all day about, you know, Whitney Houston. You know, if we're doing it about, like, we're actually using it to learn and expand our knowledge, it can be phenomenal. Now, at the same time, too, it's inherent dangers. There's also this push through transhumanism to somehow integrate us into the machine, and that's a whole other thing, and that's something we need to be very wary of. I mean, I even see things like they're now trying to put chips inside us, and that's all psychopathic to make us. That's the ultimate tool for the psychopath, to get into our consciousness and own it, and that's what the next book, Defeated Demons, is about. It's about protecting your consciousness from that, from any more incursions from the psychopathic control grid. Very important stuff here, something we need to get aware of. They have the kids today with the week of, you know, video game consoles. That's harmless enough. It's just a thing in their hand. The next thing will be a strap that they strap onto their head. The next time we have that, the next thing will be an implantable chip. And we're all at that point.
Indeed.
We must pay no. Because they'll say things like, oh, your child can learn French in one evening if they get this chip. No, your child hasn't learned French. Your child has a chip in their brain. That's not the same thing. That's not a knowledge path. That's not developing your child's brain. So this is where the psychopathic control grid, which is what I call, the term I use for the overall, you know, psychopathology that runs our world, that goes back, you know, from the time of Babylon. Their main objective now is to get us into the machine. So once we're in there for good. So be wary of things like the Zeitgeist movement, the Venus Project, the Thrive movement, the UN Agenda 20. It's all ultimately feeding into the same thing. The mechanization of the human mind. Happy days for the psychopaths. Maintain your humanity at all costs, both in a relationship and both as a society.
Absolutely, and I always tell people, you know, it's about your consciousness. That is the greatest gift that the Creator gave you, and you have to guard it at every turn, because you are constantly being bombarded. And I have to do a disclaimer. Me personally, I am not fearful, but what I'm fearful about is that people will drink the Kool-Aid and not really look at both sides of the coin, because, you know, Thomas, there's this movement where one is running through the tulips. Oh, I don't want to know what bad is going on. It's going to mess with my frequency if you concentrate on the bad. And then there are people who constantly, you know, percolate in the bad things of reality. But the fact of the matter is that we are in a dualistic reality with many different gray areas, and you have to look at all sides of the pie and be mindful of that, because knowledge is power. And I think awareness, because what we're doing right now is good. You know, you're bringing awareness to people, but there also can be a dark side, and we cannot be naive in that reality, if you will. And I just hope that the masses, people who are awake and non-awake, don't drink the Kool-Aid, because, you know, like you said, there are psychopaths in the spiritual community, in the conscious community, and I hope that you really concentrate on that, because, Thomas, I look at some of these things and I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you going to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge?
Yeah, all these people who say things like all is love. No, that's not true at all. Everything in nature is dualist. There's good, there's evil, there's positive, negative, female, male, up, down. You know, that's how the universe is created, through the interaction, the flux between these dualities. There's 4% of the population are a predatory consciousness that have manifested within the human condition. We have to accept that. Now, you can sit there and say, people can sit there and say things like, oh, but if I just concentrate on the positive. Well, that's a form of vegetation. Sitting in a room going, om, om, or chanting incantations for 10 hours a day. That's not what you came into this into this reality for. You didn't come in here to deny the full experience of human condition. You came here to master it. And that's what my whole agenda is with psychopaths. I didn't come here to hide from psychopaths. I didn't come here to be damaged by them and then, you know, wander around as a non-person for the rest of my life. I came here to master that experience, and that's what my work is about. You've got to master the experience of the psychopathic individual in society in order to transcend it, and then we can move on to something else. But we cannot have this blinkered infantilism that everything is love, light, and peace, and everything is wonderful, because that is a trap. That is going to lead you straight into the path of these creatures. There's not everything is love. At the center of everything is not love. At the center of everything is probably like nothing when you think about it. But we must learn to accept this challenge, take it on, and then master it. And that's truly what living is about: the good and the bad. That's what we came here for, and that's what gives us richness into our lives.
Absolutely, and not everything born into this reality is of, good either, and that's a very big misconception. So people need to wipe the cold out of their eyes and accept this is what it is. There's a dualistic reality, and not every human being on the planet has a little bit of good. That is not the case. There's just some people who are in this reality. It's not their fault. It's what it is, who are not born with good seeds. They're just not. You know, I never fell into that trap. My grandmother's like, you better wake up and smell the reality. There's duality and gray areas in between. So when you recognize this, you're able to protect yourself. Protection in knowledge is always key. What are some of the projects that are coming up on the burner for you? Because you have some amazing projects coming up, Thomas.
Well, the first one is next week I'm starting a speaking tour at the UK. I'm going to be in Brighton on the 1st of March, and then on the 3rd and 4th at the Art Convention, which is a fabulous event in Bath in the southwest of England. So if anyone is in that area or anywhere, come from anywhere, because I'm going to be doing 2 presentations. One on the power of creativity on the Saturday, how to overcome trauma, and the second one will be basically a warning for humanity against what we've been talking about today, the psychopathic attack upon humanity. I've got a new film out called Breaking the Babylon Mind. You can get that at iconplanet.com. It's a beautiful film produced by Steve King about basically how we can restore our consciousness to a sort of a more mature level in order to get out of the sort of the Babylon hive mind in terms of developing our right and left, because I'm an artist. I'm very much interested in the development of consciousness and how it affects our view of reality in a very basic way. So that's a film called Breaking the Babylon Mind. I've got a few other dates in England. Got another book coming out, Defeated Demons, which should be out in a month or so. Puzzling People is easy enough to get. It's on Amazon. And I've got a few other things in the works, some pretty big stuff coming down the road. So It's happy days. When I first came up with this, I just thought I'd write this book and I'd kind of vanish into obscurity. But I think the world is ready for this message, and they're interested in solutions. They're not interested in fear. And myself and some other people were all happy to do that. And let's kick consciousness up the backside and get out of this mess, because this is it. This is the Battle of Armageddon, and it's taking place inside our consciousness. And a big part of that is to going to the labyrinth of the psychopath. And just like James Joyce, Joseph Campbell, and Carl Jung told us, in all the mythologies, we go into the labyrinth, we identify the dragon or the monster or the minotaur, we slay them, and we come out and we bring that monomyth out to society as a whole. And each one of us has an obligation to be a hero, and that's really what my message is at the end of the day. Take control of your own life, slay your own demons, confront your own shadow, and then move on, and hopefully we'll get a better world from that.
Absolutely, I completely agree. Knowledge is power, and it's not about fear, and I have to always reiterate, because for some reason people always misconstrue people's words. It's not about fear, it's about knowledge, it's about information, so you're able to protect yourself. I hope, Thomas, that when your next book comes out, that you will come back to the HO Network and talk about the psychopathic labyrinth that has been created with humanity, because from my perspective, we're on lockdown. We're on psychological lockdown. And people are percolating and don't even know what's going on. So I would love for you to come hang out with us again.
Well, I'd be delighted to. I've really enjoyed the talk. Yeah, and I'd be glad to come back.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and I send you so much love in your endeavors, and we can't wait for you to come back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Family, that was a wonderful show. I am speechless. There's so much information that we did not talk about on this radio show today. I mean, it's just information-packed. It is literally, as I said at the beginning of the show, a manual, if you will, to be able to recognize the psychopathic behavior in your environment with people, because, as I stated, we have been indoctrinated to believe that these are individuals who are killers and so on and so forth. Yes, that is the extreme, but they're everywhere. Manipulators are everywhere and things of this nature, and we need to be able to recognize what those traits are within the individuals that we deal with in our environment, not out of fear, but out of knowledge and knowing, and being able to protect our consciousness. Our consciousness is like a child. We have to protect it at all costs. And it is a part of our spiritual software that makes us evolve and helps us to evolve in this reality. And we have to make sure that we protect ourselves at all costs. Family, make sure that you go to YouTube and type in Thomas Sheridan or Labyrinth of the Psychopath. You will be able to find, I'm scrolling down on my tabs, you will be able to find his video series. It is 25 videos on the psychopath and the characteristics and more in detail of these individuals in your environment, and actually how to get away from them if you're in their environment. And he also talks about something that's very important, because I know people have maybe in some point married a psychopath and had children. He talks about how to deal with a relationship like that. How does one deal with a relationship where you've married a master manipulator and you've actually had a child or children with them? How do you deal with getting out of the relationship? How do you deal with them because you have children and things of this nature? So he goes into great depth and detail in this. So make sure that you go to YouTube again and type into your search engine Thomas Sheridan. You can also find him on Facebook, so type into your search engine Thomas Sheridan. Family, he has awesome, wonderful things percolating. And make sure that you check out the HONetwork.weebly.com. That's the HO Network, WEEBLY. And also, we're on YouTube, and I will be downloading this show on YouTube so everybody can listen on YouTube. As I always say, family, I send you love, be happy, and live happy. And until next time, family, bye-bye.